Leave me alone. I'm looking for my rabbit. Lu Shijin once again looked for a small free child all over the world. The last episode mentioned Xiao Wenying taking Yanyi to the training ground inside the manor. A group of alpha saw the rabbit and could not help but whistle and mock, but after Xiao Wenying's shock did not dare to say more. I saw him randomly take a pistol and point it at the fixed target and press the trigger. With an explosion, Xiao Wenying's finger gently fixed the target and fell down. Then another target rose quickly from its original position. Yanyi calmly looked at the target. Xiao Wenying handed him the gun. Do you play for a while? Yanyi stared at the gun in his hand and replied softly, Domestic 64 is small in power and small in painting capacity. It's just ordinary police. Xiao Wenying leaned over and stroked his hair. Then you go pick one you like, okay? Alpha, who was watching the excitement, panted for a while. Some had already taken off their goggles and turned around with a smile on their faces. Yanyi stood on the wall and selected for a while. Then, in the eyes of the shocked crowd, he picked up a Thu Dare Thunder in the glass cabinet for display. He picked up a 50-pound heavy machine gun bullet and several interesting alpha whistled back. He was sarcastic. He did not install a retreat device. He dared to open the Thunder. The claws of the rabbit would fracture. Xiao Wenying quickly stopped him with a helpless expression and whispered softly in his ear, Baby, this thing can kill dinosaurs. It's expensive to maintain my training ground. Change it. Yanyi glanced at him with disdain and threw the Thu Dare away casually. Yanyi's slender and fair wrist picked it up easily. 2 empty guns can weigh 5 pounds of large caliber revolver M500. The ridicule of the spectators around them immediately weakened. Yanyi pulled out the painting with one hand and skillfully pushed 5 magnum bullets into the painting. Xiao Wenying held his elbow. His weak body could not withstand 2 M500's hard and fierce back seat. Get out of the way. Yanyi swept the muzzle away and pushed the safety on his shoulders. The 2 pistols rotated twice at the fingertips and fired at the moment when the muzzle stopped. The first row of 4 fixed targets fell down one after another and immediately bounced up. The 4 moving targets fell down in an instant when they stood up. Yanyi's hands did not shake at all except for the safety. He gently blew the muzzle. Habitually, he stuck his gun into his tactical belt and realized that he was not wearing a tactical belt. There was a trace of fan ran in the eyes of the little rabbit, and then I realized that I hadn't worn a tactical belt in years, and then a series of perfect shots won all the alpha shock and applause. Xiao Wenying looked at the soft side profile of the little rabbit. When he put down the gun, his cold eyes showed innocence. He couldn't move his eyes for a long time. He began to understand why Lu Shijin fell in love with an Omega with such a low degree of compatibility with himself when he was young. Because he was simply too hot. On the other hand, several of Lu Shijin's right-hand men are all immersed in checking all the surveillance tapes in the city for 4 days. At this time, he has not slept for more than 24 hours. His subordinates tell him that the villa's security system is intact. Only during this period, all internal surveillance cameras have been shut down. It means that Yanyi opened the door and was taken away by the intruder. He didn't resist and let the spider take him away. Where did he go? Why can't Yanyi listen to his reason? Which alpha can keep calm when he knows that his Omega may be contaminated by others? Just seeing the surveillance videos before can make him crazy. Yanyi must be deliberately retaliating against him. Perhaps the little rabbit gets too little attention, like a child who can't get attention. He must make some big noise to show his presence. The lop-eared rabbit Omega fake Y should have been pressed to deal with it, otherwise the damage to the body would be more serious. He just made the mistake of personally moving his hand and eager to let Yanyi learn a lesson. He shouldn't have been so rude. But Bunny misunderstood. He thought he had caused him to lose his baby. Things shouldn't have turned out like this. Things turned out to be off track. Lu Jinchong sat on the sofa for a long time and pondered. Is he really wrong? The ashtray at hand is full of praise. Lu Shijin restrained himself from imagining a more terrifying situation. He did not dare to tell himself that it was because Yanyi had just been forced to abort. In a state of double trauma, his mind and body were completely helpless against the spider. The more he dared not think about this idea, the more he could not get rid of it. He hugged his head that was about to explode and threw a table of documents to the ground. The phone rang at an inappropriate time. Lu Jinji's eyes immediately followed the past. After seeing the familiar number, his eyes darkened. Xia Pingshan was leaning on the sofa with a cigarette in his mouth. Brother Lu, my contract phone was silent for 3 seconds. And then suddenly, almost like, I'm looking for a fucking rabbit. Xia Pingshan took his phone away and waited for Lu Shangjian to finish shouting before he leaned back to his ear. He was now especially ashamed to kiss his brother in front of Lu Shangjian and got his friend's wife pregnant. Although Xia Jingshan promised him that he had not done anything out of line, he believed it. However, whether people believed it or not was a matter of fact. Speaking of which, his wife had lost her, but the mirror had also run away. Up until now, he still could not find her. Therefore, he said, "Well, look, first give me my contract. I can't find him. I don't sign anything." Lu Xiao, who has always been known for his calm and self-restraint, has a hoarse voice. People can hear a trace of weakness from the smoke. Xia Pingshan immediately asked the driver to send him to Changhui City. He pushed open the door of Lu Jinjin's office. I stepped on a document with a transparent cover, and then I saw that there were documents flying all over the floor, like a carpet, and there was no place to stay. Lu Zijin stared at his bloodshot eyes and typed on his laptop. Xia Pingshan walked over and took a look at Lu Zijin's computer. His expression froze, and he immediately closed the computer for him. "Are you crazy?" Xia Pingshan raised his voice and stared at him. "Why are you using PBB to open the location?" He was taken away by Xiao Wenying. Xiao Wenying has been active abroad. There is very little information in China. He doesn't need his own name to register anything. He doesn't need PBB permission to find out where he is. I think you don't know the situation. Xia Pingshan took out a USB drive from his pocket. Insert the card and enter a string of keys. He opens the latest file. There are some blurred photos in it. Through the back and some habitual gestures, he can identify Lu Lin. Lu Lin has been working in the laboratory of the differentiation base. Now most of the PBB data has fallen into his hands. He replaced the commander-in-chief and grew a PBB member as a gland hunter to search for high-level glands for him. How can you use PBB authority to ensure that he won't find out what you used to do? How can he close my eyes for a while? The high intensity of concentration for a long time makes him have a splitting headache. He has never felt the loss as clearly and bluntly as he does now. Even before the bunny ran away in anger, he was confident that he could coax him back, but he may have been captured and needs to take him home. He can't receive any news from Yanyi. It must be because he was imprisoned. The little rabbit must miss him very much. He just can't contact him. He may be afraid. He may hide in a corner and cry and tremble. He needs to be hugged by his alpha. These days, there should be enough time for the little rabbit to reflect on himself. If the little rabbit jumps into his arms now, he will forgive him. Lu Shijin threw the computer aside and collapsed on the sofa tiredly. "Get out and leave me alone for a while." Xia Pingshan looked at him and wanted to say something but stopped. Just about to walk out of the office when suddenly heard Lu Shangjin said Xia Jingshan. I remember him. Xia Pingshan, like a soft spot was poked, suddenly turned around, cold face, asked, "What do you mean?" Lu Shijin's cold eyes are half open. "What do you think?" Xia Pingshan shouted at my brother. "I know him very well. First, he didn't do anything out of line. Second, he didn't interfere with your relationship. Your wife miscarried. This is something that people do. If I remember correctly, you and Yanyi were together 10 years ago. How many people have changed around you in the past few years? You lost your wife. Why did you throw the pan at my mirror? I'll say it first. If you touch my mirror, we'll immediately hear the noise in the office. Hurry in and pull Xia Pingshan to the sofa on the other side. Bring tea and Bo to apologize. Director Xia, you should go to the restroom to rest for a while." The mobile phone rang inopportunely. Xia Pingshan looked down and saw that it was a small mirror. He did not care about Lu Jinji and quickly answered the stinky boy. "You still know that Xia Jingshan's originally clear voice opposite me has become a little haggard, as if he was looking for something tiredly for a long time. Brother, the driver said that you went to find Lu Shijin, and if he was there." Lu Shangjin took the phone from Xia Pingshan first. Xia Jingshan spoke first. "Lu Shangjin, I apologize, but not to you. I apologize to Yanyi. I shouldn't have pestered Yanyi because of the high compatibility. I shouldn't have asked others for his phone number and address. I shouldn't have given him flowers." Xia Jingshan suddenly raised his voice. Guilt and anger burst out at the same time. "The most I shouldn't have done was touch his back when he was most uncomfortable." His voice was haggard and hoarse. Even if he roared, there was no threat. Lu Jin was like falling into an ice cave. The pores on his body seemed to be cold to the body. On the other end of the phone, Xia Jingshan continued, "How did I know that touching it would make me fake pregnant?" There was a trace of hard pharyngeal gland dormant needle in his voice that was hard to detect. It made him feel so uncomfortable. I gave him comfort pheromones to comfort him. He was clearly asleep, but he was grateful and whispered, "Brother Jin." "Who is Brother Jin?" "No, you're the asshole who never gives a shit about him. How many times a day does he vomit? What do you feed him? Strawberries? Why don't you give him a bucket of ice water to torture him to death? You know he'll eat anything you feed him. Why don't you be patient and think about what he can and can't eat? You know A3 Omega has an instinct to depend on the marker. If you don't want to be responsible, why did you mark him?" The phone was finally hung up by Lu Jinjin. He stood there, slumped on the couch, unable to think at all. He just wants the little rabbit to come back quickly. In fact, he can explain everything. This is really a misunderstanding. Xia Pingshan threw the phone aside and looked at Lu Shangjin with a sneer. If I were you, I would use GPS tracking to scan the whole country. Aren't you affectionate? You use it. Non-alpha tracking ability requires pheromone contact and general direction to facilitate in the case of unable to delimit the scope of the scanning area. The larger the use of pheromones, the more the gland energy will cause damage to the ability to swim. Mostly used in sniping and fixed point tracking, which fool will exhaust gland energy to carpet scanning. But Lu Jin's dim eyes suddenly lit up with a silver light. Summer with the sky to see his expression suddenly surprised you. You can't be serious. I will follow back. Before I could finish speaking, the whole office had a very high pheromone explosion. Narcissus was accompanied by Xiao Wenying when the M2 ability was activated on the land. Even if the security system of the villa was turned off, it still left a trace of spider web on the door handle. Shang Jin followed the smell of poppy pheromone to find the provincial wells where Xiao Wenying had been seen and expanded the search range to include similar pheromones in the suspect range. Xia Pingshan did not expect that he would really consume gland energy and watch the blood disappear from Lu Jinji's face. He picked up his cell phone and called the hospital to send an ambulance immediately. Lu Jinyi rose and knelt down, only to see cold sweat covering his cheeks instantly. The running water generally drops on the solid wood floor in front of Xiao Wenying, who may have used some means to shield pheromones. Lu Jinjin scanned more than 20 provinces and cities in his mind, but he did not find traces of Xiao Wenying. However, at the moment when he lost consciousness due to overdraft of gland energy, he found pheromones similar to Xiao Wenying. It's a juvenile spider omega pheromone. It's Mundala. On the other side, Xiao Wenying's estate. Xiao Wenying saw Yanyi wearing a black sports vest in the equipment practice area of the gym. He concentrated on doing the high pull-down weight behind the neck. The maximum weight of the equipment used for alpha here is 200 kilograms. Although the rabbit is thin, the training marks on the body can be thought of. His heyday body mega due to body size restrictions. The muscles are not exaggerated. Soft and beautiful. Every time the arms pull down, the back profile forms an attractive angle. Occasionally a drop of sweat trickles down his back into his narrow waist. After finishing the last set of training, Yanyi released his hand 200 kilograms. When a muffled sound fell back to the original position on the rubber pad, Xiao Wenying went over and took a bottle of fresh milk and threw it to him. Yanyi took it in his hand for a while. Tired or not. Xiao Wenying sat on the equipment beside him and wiped the sweat off Yanyi's nose. Yanyi unscrewed the bottle of fresh milk and drank half a bottle. He replied, I'm a little tired. Xiao Wenying teased and laughed evilly. Let's take a shower together. Yanyi ignored Xiao Wenying's teasing and asked calmly when to let me go. Xiao Wenying opened his hand. This is not allowed. I can satisfy other conditions. For example, the weight of the equipment here is changed to 250 kilograms. Yanyi was silent for a while. Change it to 300, then go straight to the bathroom. Yanyi took a shower and came out of the shower room. Xiao Wenying was sitting leisurely in the leisure area and flipping through fitness magazines. When he came out, he closed his magazine and prepared Iberian ham for lunch. Yanyi didn't bother to pick up his eyelids. Why didn't you prepare roast rabbit? Xiao Wenying froze for a moment and frowned and smiled. Sorry for my thoughtlessness. I immediately asked them to change to vegetarian food. Yanyi looked at him in confusion. This spider seemed to have a good temper, but it always revealed the danger of touching the bottom line. It was hard to understand. Yanyi held the railing leading to the ground floor and walked up the spiral stairs. Xiao Wenying suddenly turned around and extended his hand to Yanyi. Yanyi stopped and felt that he was blocking the way. Xiao Wenying stood on the steps and leaned over his knees to hold Yanyi's lips with his fingertips. You can't relax like this. You have to learn to enjoy life and get along with alpha with high compatibility. At this time, Xiao Wenying's paralyzing toxin penetrated into his back along Guan Yi's slightly open mouth. Yanyi hesitated for a moment and put his hand in Xiao Wenying's palm. At this moment, the alarm of the manor sounded rapidly. Xiao Wenying raised his eyelids. The amorous feelings in the peach blossom eyes disappeared into cold and sinister in an instant. Wait for me in the restaurant. Xiao Wenying held Yanyi's fingertips. I went out to have a look and came back in a while. Yanyi obediently went upstairs and several of his men ran over to tell Xiao Wenying that someone had destroyed the surveillance outside the training ground. Xiao Wenying lowered his voice and went to have a look. Several bodyguards with guns sneaked into the training ground. Xiao Wenying immediately followed them. The training ground was filled with a smell of blood. The bodies of the security personnel fell in all corners. 7 or 8 gland hunters broke into the training ground, and standing at the front was their leader, Cannibal Alp, M2 Cannibal Alf gland hunters, and the first price was M2 Cannibal Alf. It seems that Lu Jinjin has not found the door so quickly. Xiao Wenying relaxed a little. Sure enough, the eagle was blindfolded. The white rabbit was hard to catch. The cannibal saw the lazy Xiao Wenying sitting on the wrought iron railing. He smiled and revealed a row of sharp triangular fangs. "You are the boss here. I heard that there are Omega of M2 level here." It seems that Yanyi's glands have recovered to M2 level, alarming the gland hunter Xiao Wenying. "I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe he came, but he probably left." His thick eyebrows were furrowed together. "Boss, don't ask me." He pulled back the collar to reveal a circle of blue serial number PBB00036 on his neck. Xiao Wenying raised his eyebrows. However, it was PBB's human attack power. Cannibal Alpha single combat power of the same level was very strong. Spiders, a race that was good at controlling and confusing, were difficult to fight head-on. All the ammo boxes are automatically locked and recovered when the training ground security system is triggered, but there's no way they're going to take their hard-earned A3 years. At this time, Xiao Wenying suddenly heard footsteps behind him. A figure bounced out from the railing beside him. Fish wrapped in bandages. Each hand held a Japanese two that had just been taken from the vertical wall. He jumped down from the high platform expressionlessly and slashed down with his blade. Without hesitation, he stabbed into the shoulder of the man-eater and blood splattered in, landing on Yanyi's pale cheek. Xiao Wenying's gaze was fixed on Yanyi. He was not afraid of the smell of blood at all. He attacked Yanyi head-on with his man-eating J1 ability. His every move was fatal. This handsome, vicious, beautiful, and soft little rabbit was so beautiful. Like a red poppy in Xiao Wenying's heart, a cluster of enchanting flowers, this little rabbit should belong to him. In the training ground, the blood gas is soaring, and the broken limbs are scattered all over the ground. After seeing the alpha of the man-eater fall to the ground, Yanyi draws a knife on the gland of the body and completely destroys the gland. After waving his hand, he throws off the sticky blood on the blade. He lifted the collar of Alpha with the tip of his knife to reveal the brand BB00036 on his neck. Looking back, he took a light glance at the 7 people surrounding himself. J1 Alpha felt that the threat to himself was 0. Therefore, he closed his knife and turned around. He was scared to turn around and run. However, the entrance to the entrance was sealed by a layer of sticky spider web. Any gap was blocked. The bodyguards with guns rushed forward to press the group of fleeing rats to the ground and took Xiao Wenying away one by one. At this time, the undercurrent in his chest had not calmed down yet. He also reached out and wanted to tuck a strand of hair in front of his forehead behind his ear for Yanyi. The flashing blade of the knife suddenly raised Yanyi's expressionless face and pointed the knife at him so that he could not approach half a step. It was the courtship pheromone wrapped in the smell of poppy flowers in the air. Yanyi noticed that he only saw him softly asking me when I could go out. Xiao Wenying returned to his usual elegant appearance. His fingertips knocked on the back of the knife and raised the corner of his lips. He asked what he was doing. He tried to recall the memories in his mind, but it became a little chaotic. Obviously, last night's dinner was still vivid, but some things he could not remember clearly. The memory in my mind became a little chaotic. Obviously, last night's dinner was still vivid, but some things were not clear. Xiao Wenying turned sideways to avoid the blade and approached the white rabbit standing opposite. "Let's go, the smell of blood here is too pungent. If you stay for a long time, you'll get a headache." As she said this, she gently held Yanyi's neck and her fingertips indistinctly brushed against the glandular skin of Little Rabbit. A wisp of undetectable poison flowed through the glands and nerves into the other party's brain. Yanyi sheathed the knife and threw it to Xiao Wenying. He said indifferently, "Not a bad knife, do you like it?" Xiao Wenying took him out of the training ground. "I also collected several famous knives. Tomorrow, I will take you to the arsenal to see Yanyi's confused eyes. I can't say anything unusual. I saw him muttering in a low voice and asking you, 'Who are you?' My surname is Xiao, you always call me when Jing." Xiao Wenying turned Yanyi around and pressed it against the iron railing like the most natural couple lift their heads affectionately and have gentle and exciting eyes in peach blossoms. "I am your minister under your skirt." Yanyi's empty eyes could not converge on the face in front of him. A strange cold face and Xiao Wenying overlapped. The cold and heroic features gradually blurred into a soft alpha face in front of him. Deep and beautiful, he held Xiao Wenying's cheek. The more he looked at it, the more familiar he felt. The cold face that had been engraved for many years seemed to have been erased by an eraser. The harder he tried to recall, the faster he erased it. It was like catching the last withered petal in the endless darkness. However, no matter how hard he tried, the petals still turned into ashes and disappeared from his palm. What exactly was it? Yanyi hugged his head, curled up, and screamed, "It doesn't matter. I'm here." Xiao Wenying picked up the rabbit. Yanyi suddenly hugged him tightly. He trembled in his arms. He put his face into his neck. His rapid breathing gently swept Xiao Wenying's skin. Xiao Wenying rubbed his pen. He had goosebumps on his arms. His heart and his chest seemed to be repeatedly touched by a soft feather. Sure enough, The charm of A3 Omega was irresistible. In the sword light, the blood in the battle, the slender waist, the ruthless eyes are amazing as if the starlight that shakes the pupil membrane, and when he throws himself into his arms, the alpha neck is weak. The rapid heartbeat tells his fear and grievance, but he can conquer a hard and vicious heart into tender spring water. Xiao Wenying thought that having such an Omega seemed to be a pretty good thing. He asked the servant to take Yanyi to clean the blood on his body and change into a fresh pajamas. Xiao Wenying led him to his bedroom. Yanyi stepped barefoot on the soft long hair carpet. He looked at his toes and thought, should I sleep here? Suddenly, Xiao Wenying took a pair of arms and kissed his ears. Why don't you come up? I asked him if he had ever seen me before. Xiao Wenying sat on the bed and pulled Yanyi over to hold the rabbit in his lap, and he clasped his hands in his palm. Yanyi noticed that he was wearing a platinum ring on the ring finger of his left hand. He was surprised and looked at his right hand. He was also wearing a similar ring. Xiao Wenying sighed in his ear. Actually, we have been married for a long time, but you have never liked my little rabbit ears. Xiao Wenying put his chin on his head and was slapped on his cheek by two little rabbit ears. It fell down very soft and hot. Yanyi recalled in his mind for a while that there seemed to be such a thing. In his memory, he was indeed married, but he was a philandering rabbit. He often had a one-night stand with other alpha. Xiao Wenying buried his face in Yanyi's shoulder and whispered, "What's wrong with me? Why don't you like me?" Yanyi turned his head and saw this alpha peach blossom eyes angry with a layer of tears in his eyes. His charming eyes blinked and tears dripped on his shoulder. He trembled. Yanyi turned around a little slowly and whispered, "You're not bad." Yanyi turned around slowly and wiped Xiao Wenying's eyes. He didn't expect to do such a bad thing. Xiao Wenying pulled Yanyi into her arms and let him feel his heart beating. In places Yanyi couldn't see, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up proudly. The expression of the little rabbit just now was too wonderful. The happy eyes were simply like a regret for his own death. The paralysis toxin he injected into the little rabbit's brain had reached the point where he had already produced a favorite memory under his guidance. He pressed down on Yanyi and kissed his glands from behind. Yanyi did not resist. Xiao Wenying's courtship pheromone and his own pheromone produced high compatibility, making Yanyi feel comfortable and relaxed. "I like you." Xiao Wenying approached his ear from behind. "Can we live a good life in the future?" Yanyi turned around and said yes. Xiao Wenying paused for a moment. At this moment, an idea suddenly appeared in his mind. He wanted to occupy the beautiful woman in front of him alone. He lowered his head and his sharp canine teeth instantly imprinted on Yanyi's skin. Yanyi grunted. A strong pheromone roar rushed into the body and the blood vessels. Xiao Wenying released a stronger courtship pheromone compatibility pheromone for a mental collapse. Omega cannot say that it feels pain, but the pain was immediately diluted by the comfort of high compatibility, the ultimate joy, which made him indulge in love and grief, the despair of losing his child, all blocked in his heart, almost driving him crazy. He silently wept and gradually lost his mind in his eyes. Forget it. Should all those chaotic memories that he dared not even think about be forgotten? Xiao Wenying untied the belt with one hand. At this moment, a child's hysterical voice suddenly broke out outside the half-closed bedroom door. Xiao Wenying was shocked. He gently patted Yanyi's back and waited for me to finish. He quickly fastened his belt. "Don't go out of the bedroom. Open the door and see Xiao Wenqi fall outside the bedroom door crying out of breath." Xiao Wenying quickly leaned over to pick up his brother. "How did you come?" Xiao Wenqi cried and cried. Tears covered his tender face. "Don't bully the rabbit who saved Wenqi." Xiao Wenying was stunned for a moment. Xiao Wenqi cried and couldn't breathe. The car crashed into the rabbit and took away the stinky chicken house of Wenqi. "Don't bully him." After he finished, he took a pack of tissue in his hand and took it to the packaging bag of tissue in front of him. There was a faint milk candy fragrance on it. Xiao Wenying always had a slight smile on his face. Weekend evenings are packed with traffic for hundreds of meters, slow snakes wriggling. The pungent smell of gasoline and exhaust makes people anxious and irritable. It's like a virus that transpires in the gaps between the traffic jams. A Bentley Continental was in reverse in the emergency lane, and several police cars were chasing after Lu Jin, tiredly tearing off the medical tape on the back of his hand to reveal a blood cut accidentally made when he pulled out the fourth needle. He glanced in the rearview mirror at the police car chasing him and quickly got off the ramp. At this time, he suddenly recalled that when he was young, Jin Chang and Yanyi drove together once. On the edge of a steep cliff, the two of them leaned against the car door to rest. Yanyi sits on the hood and puts the helmet in the leg socket. The little rabbit ears jump back and smile and ask Jin Ge why I can't catch up with you. "What skills do you have to teach me?" Lu Shangjin proudly raises his eyebrows. "To catch up with me and I will teach you." Lu Shangjin smashed the steering wheel hard. He didn't want it anymore. He didn't want the little rabbit. He tried hard to chase him. He didn't want anything now. Yanyi did slow man. He just wanted the little rabbit to come back quickly. Yanyi hugged the little spider and thought that if he also had a child, it would definitely be an equally cute and beautiful little rabbit treasure. When the little spider suddenly came home, Yanyi and the spider brothers had a happy dinner together as if they were a family. Halfway through the meal, he suddenly touched his belly. I think there should be a baby here. Where did he go? Yanyi only ate a little, but he couldn't eat any more. He went to wash his hands and went straight back to the bedroom. He was curled up on his side in bed, and the chaotic images in his mind were mixed up in a jumble of colors, and then the door to the room was pushed open. Yanyi opened his eyes slowly and found Xiao Wenying hugging Wenqi, who was sleeping, and stuffing him into his arms. The little spider had just taken a bath. Her small hands and small face were warm. Her long eyelashes were obediently drooping. The pheromone on Yanyi smashed her mouth and squeezed a small ball into Yanyi's arm. Xiao Wenying sat by the bed and gently touched Wenqi's soft hair. She said softly, "My parents were killed by gland hunters." At that time, Wenqi was only 1.5 years old. Since he could talk, he has been asking me when my fathers will come back. I couldn't explain it to him. I could only say that my fathers turned into stars and went to the sky to look at Wenqi. Was it very uncreative? Xiao Wenying smiled gently and calmly as if telling someone else's story. He was my most important relative. Xiao Wenying bent his index finger and touched Wenqi's jelly face. You saved him. Sorry. I didn't know. Yanyi shook his head. Actually, he doesn't remember anything about it. He held Wenqi in his arms and released soft pheromones to make the soft and fragile little Omega feel safe and quiet. The little face buried in his arms was white and beautiful like a porcelain doll. It looked really fragile. Yanyi tried to raise his fingertips and gently touched his soft little back. It was unbelievable. He thought if he had a child himself, it must be an equally cute and beautiful little rabbit treasure, so he has to protect this fragile little Omega well. He can't let anyone hurt him unconsciously. Yanyi is tired and falls asleep in his arms. He holds Wenqi Xiao Wenying and pulls a thin quilt for them. He bent over and carefully studied Xiao Bai Mian's sleeping face. She was quiet and peaceful. He carefully formed a ball and circled the little spider in his arms to protect Xiao Wenying. He kissed Yanyi's forehead for a long time before he said sorry softly. After dawn, Xiao Wenying called the principal. He asked the principal to take it seriously, and he didn't want it to happen a second time, and he hung up, and he turned around and he was about to go back, and there was a dessert shop next door. Xiao Wenying himself doesn't like sweets, but he likes a honey mango layer in the store. He tells the pastry chef that he wants to pack 2 cakes. The pastry chef cuts the mango and laughs. Mr. has children at home. Children like to eat this dessert very much. Xiao Wenying leaned against the door and put his hands in his trouser pockets. The corners of his mouth curved up. He answered the pastry chef that he had children. And 2 of them. When Xiao Wenying returned to the manor, he saw Yanyi holding Wenqi and sitting under the maple tree in the courtyard. Wenqi was holding an English homework book. He listened to Yanyi with a mechanical pencil and wrote a few lines in the gap between the homework. He explained some grammar to Wenqi, and the arrangement was clear and easy to understand. Wenqi listened for a while and then fell asleep in Yanyi's arms. Yanyi picked up his eyes and saw Xiao Wenying. He smiled softly and said, "You're back." Xiao Wenying walked over and flicked Wenqi's forehead. He sat next to Yanyi, and he didn't listen seriously at all. Did he also sleep in class every day at school? Wenqi covered his head and hated the police. Xiao Wenying looked at Yanyi and turned around to show off to Xiao Wenying. "I said I love you in 8 languages." Xiao Wenying listened and looked at Yanyi, who was holding Wenqi, with a smile in his eyes. He didn't expect Xiao Mianzi to be more than a killing machine. This made him more and more impressed. He took out 2 round thin cardboard boxes, and Wenqi's eyes lit up. He immediately took away a box and sat on the bench to open the ribbon. "What gift is it today?" Yan Yizhang took the pastry box and untied the ribbon. The fragrance of mango and honey suddenly came out. He received a gift. Xiao Wenying put his hand on the back of the bench and raised his eyes slightly. "I can listen to 8 languages. I love you." Yanyi opened his mouth. He lowered his head again. He couldn't say something so explicit to anyone. "I love you. I love you." Wenqi held a small spoon in his mouth and his eyes were round. He looked between Yanyi and his brother and felt that his brother was so embarrassed. So he took a big mouthful of honey mango and said "love you" loudly. Xiao Wenying picked him up and kissed his cheek. "Love you, honey." Yanyi looked at them gently and smiled. He lowered his head and ate his snacks in small bites. This kind of life is also very comfortable and safe, which is the peace he yearned for, but for some reason, he felt lost, as if something had been blown away by the wind and lost, even leaving no memory. During the May Day holiday, the school was particularly quiet. Only a few officers were on duty. There was a harsh scolding in the principal's office. Xiao Wenqi's class teacher, Teacher Zhang, was suspended for concealing Wenqi's near-death accident. After Zhang Zhouhong was severely scolded by the principal, he still had to hold a grade meeting to rectify the problem of teachers' dereliction of duty. Xiao Wenying only asked the principal to take this matter seriously. However, the principal was eager to curry favor with him and would make a mistake. He directly suspended teacher Zhang. She stepped on her high heels and walked out of the school. This time she lost her job because she offended Xiao Wenying. She will not even be able to establish herself in this industry in the future. She walked to the side of the road and sat down with her arms folded. She did not understand why Xiao Wenqi was completely unscathed. Why did Xiao Wenying want to vent his anger on her? Can he break the life of an ordinary family for his brother? Zhang Zhouhong sat on the side of the road crying and enduring for many years. The grievances suddenly surged up. She did not notice that a Bentley parked 10 meters away was supported on the steering wheel and quietly looked at her. He had just come out of the hospital where Yanyi had a physical examination. He relied on the pheromones left on the report sheet to find the doctor who wrote this examination report. Dr. Sun was tortured for half his life before he trembled and said the name of President Xiao. Lu Jinjin suddenly realized that everything was Xiao Wenying secretly sowing discord. His methods were too hidden, so that they unconsciously became more and more hostile until they separated. It turned out that Xiao Wenying had already targeted Yan Yi's A3 gland, and he didn't protect Yan Yi well. Lu Jinjin wiped the steering wheel hard. His red eyes were almost dripping blood. He couldn't sleep for a minute now. As long as he closed his eyes, he would hear Yan Yi's trembling cry for help and see his helpless face. He remembered that day when he pressed the rabbit to the ground. It made him feel worse than death. He wants to save the rabbit and go home. He wants to say sorry to the rabbit. It's all his fault. He will definitely love him and take good care of him in the future. Instead of making him tremble at everything, he'll reflect on his years of rudeness. Until now, Lu Shijin realized that only those who love him will give up everything he once owned for him. He completely failed the romantic pure heart that the little rabbit once burned. He thought of the day when he pressed the little rabbit to the ground and made him feel so much pain that he was worse than death. Lu Jinjin finally realized how wrong he was. He wanted to tell the little rabbit that he was sorry. It was all his fault. The little rabbit gave up everything he had for him, but he completely failed that pure and romantic heart. The female teacher sitting on the road has been crying for 10 minutes. Lu Jinjin is even more upset. He stayed for a while. If he was not afraid of the news, he would also like to sit on the road and cry for a while. He followed a trace of datura pheromone and found a spider omega similar to Xiao Wenying. The approximate range was defined in this primary school. The female teacher came from this school. Lu Jin pondered how to ask her if he could not alert the police. A taxi stopped in front of the female teacher before Lu Jin acted. Zhang Zhouhong waved her hand and covered her mouth. She swallowed and said that she would not take the taxi. The driver rolled down the window and poked his head out to greet Zhang Zhouhong. "Teacher Zhang, why do you hear a familiar voice here?" Zhang Zhouhong raised his head. "Master Chen? How come before you drive a taxi, Master Chen has been taking Wenqi to and from school? Zhang Zhouhong can often see him." Master Chen smiled bitterly. "I was fired by the boss. It should be the same thing as you. Get in the car. I'll change shifts. Let's find a restaurant and think of a way." Lu Zijin watched the female teacher get into the car, and he had excellent eyesight and could understand what they were saying by reading lips. After the taxi left, Lu Zijin also drove to follow. Master Chen and teacher Zhang entered a small restaurant and Lu Jinjin followed them. As soon as he entered, there was a smell of oil smoke. He did not care about so much. He sat in the corner and casually ordered 2 dishes. He focused on looking at the 2 people and pouring bitter water to each other. "I saw Master Chen take a sip of beer. Boss Xiao fired me. Before his brother went to school, I had been sending him to school. One day, the boss promised to send Wenqi to school. Later, I don't know why he broke the appointment. The child fainted. I tried to persuade him, but he didn't get in the car and ran away. Who knew that something would happen?" Teacher Zhang only cried. There's a mix of people in the diner, and occasionally a flyer sneaks in and hands out a card to each table. He picked it up and read it, and it was a tip from the nearest gland hunter club, and it was a reward for gland hunters who were looking for high-level glands to sell and roam around the city, and high-level glands were scarce, and it was difficult for a few gland hunters to keep track of them. So they launched a mass reward to get more people to help them find reliable clues, and they could get a large reward if they succeeded in catching them. Zhang Zhouhong doesn't drink much. When she saw this little leaflet, subconsciously, I whispered to Master Chen that I was right. There's something you definitely don't know. Before the children organized a physical examination, I secretly took a look at Xiao Wenqi's file. Guess what I saw? Master Chen chewed peanuts and drank wine. Xiao Wenqi actually had M2 gland differentiation potential. Master Chen suddenly choked on a mouthful of beer after listening to it. Lu Shijin's expression changed slightly. No wonder the little spider was always closely protected by bodyguards. It turned out that his glands had not been differentiated and upgraded, and he did not have the ability to protect himself. Moreover, the school physical examination report was sealed immediately, and there were strict regulations that allowed the institution to privately test the gland level and differentiation potential of minors. Therefore, the file would never mark the differentiation potential of the tester. Lu Shijin narrowed his eyes and stared at the female teacher who was worried about her morality. He looked her up and down with suspicion. And then I saw her quietly fold a flyer and stuff it in her purse. The scene that appeared in front of him at this moment let Lu Shijin suffer a fatal blow. Lu Shijin lay on the steering wheel and slept for a while. The back of his suit and trouser legs that he hadn't changed in time were all wrinkled. When he woke up, he touched the stubble on his face and chin for a few days. He didn't shave for a few days. He turned to the co-pilot and touched the spare razor. The skin of the rabbit was very soft and tender. He couldn't prick it when he comforted him. He was long until his neck and chin felt smooth and clean. The land brocade pulled the collar back with one hand. Previously, he couldn't bear the tie clip deviating from the horizontal line. Now the messy tie can be hung freely. At the end of today's holiday, children were sent to Jinjin by their parents one after another, focusing on searching for that wisp of mandala information near the school. He guessed that a driver would send that little spider over. As long as he reached the mandala pheromone, he would definitely find Xiao Wenqi. 10 minutes later, Lu Shijin suddenly froze and began to feel the familiar smell in the air, which reminded him of a box of milk candy he received when he was a child. The rabbit suddenly jumped out and hugged him slimy. Brother Jin told him to put a sweet candy in his mouth. When Lu Jin opened the car door in a hurry, he almost stepped on nothing. He looked anxiously in the dense crowd until he saw a child running over with a milk sorbet. The fragrant smell of milk hit Lu Jingxin hard. At this moment, Lu Jingxin's eyes blurred. Hope was kindled again and again, like a piece of iron that had been bent repeatedly. He finally couldn't hold it anymore. He was broken at the waist. The land brocade lowered his head and his eyes were sad. There was a layer of water in his eyes. He suddenly remembered that he had come home one morning. I saw Yanyi washing dishes in the kitchen wearing an apron, and the garbage bin was full of food that looked untouched. Yanyi saw him come back and hurriedly wiped his hands and walked out with his mouth open, as if he wanted to ask something. But after hesitating for a while, he only asked him, "Are you hungry?" Now that he thought about it, his sad eyes actually contained grievances. However, at that time, he never thought that when he waited for a sumptuous dinner, he would wait for a small rabbit that would not return tonight. Would he be sad? Lu Jinyi punched the car door heavily. At this moment, he wished he could go back to the past and eat all the food that had not been touched. He rubbed the small rabbit into his arms and make up for all the things he owed all these years. At this moment he looked up and almost thought he was hallucinating for a moment. He could still see the traffic across the street from the crowded crowd at the school gate. A long, charming figure took off his helmet. Gray hair was blown up by the wind, 2 little rabbit ears were raised, and several creases were pressed out by the helmet. Yan. Lu Shangjin couldn't help but chase after the crowd that was blocking his line of sight. A second later, he saw Yan Yi's body suddenly being pulled into his arms. Lu Shijin didn't even react. He was stunned to see Xiao Wenying wearing a tight leather coat sitting on a motorcycle. He took Yan Yi's waist from behind. He took off his helmet with one hand and kissed Yan Yi's small ear intimately. Yan Yi didn't cater but at the same time didn't refuse. Xiao Wenying gently lifted Wenqi out of the car. He bent down and took out a bag of handmade milk candy from his pocket. He whispered softly and instructed him to eat it with the children. After that, he carefully stuffed the candy into Wenqi's school bag. The little spider nodded obediently and turned around affectionately. He spoke to Yanyi in a spoiled tone. He asked Tudu and his brother to pick me up on Friday. Yanyi bent his eyes and touched his soft hair. As long as you listened carefully in school, I would promise you. Xiao Wenying raised the corner of his lips and revealed a sharp point of canine teeth. If there is an alpha kid bullying you in school, remember to call back. If you can't beat it, ask someone to help you call back and tell the teacher. It's too boring. Yanyi turned around and gave him a shut-up look. Push Wenqi's small school bag. Go quickly. Spider happily said goodbye to them. He walked to the other side of the sidewalk and Yanyi looked at him worriedly. How could he let such a small child cross the road by himself? The worry expressed by his true feelings would not lie, nor could it be disguised. Xiao Wenying stared at Yanyi's side profile and unconsciously hugged him. He whispered softly in his ear, "Let's go back. We can't stay outside the manor for too long." Yanyi nodded and gently said, Yan. The urgent shouting scared both of them who were about to go back. Lu Jin avoided the crowded people and traffic. Don't come this way. The haggard face is as pale as paper, and the hoarse voice seems to have extreme pain. Yanyi is unfamiliar and looks at him from a different place. He looks behind himself and then shows a confused expression to Xiao Wenying. He is calling me? Yanyi looks sympathetically at Lu Xiangjun. How good-looking an elf spirit seems to be not very good. Xiao Wenying first stunned and then smiled badly. In the past, when people mentioned Lu Xiao's name, the first word that people thought of was that they could not find any inappropriate posts on him. At this moment, he really wanted to take a picture of Lu Xiangjun's current wolf-fox appearance and open his eyes to friends in the circle. Then Xiao Wenying took a fresh look at Lu Xiangjun. He leaned over and kissed Yanyi on the cheek. He intended to kiss Yanyi on the cheek, but Yanyi avoided him uncomfortably, because he knew that Lu Zijin couldn't beat this situation. It was like hitting Lu Zijin head-on and making him bleed. He panted violently, his chest heaving uncontrollably, his eyes glaring so fiercely that they almost tore open the corners of his eyes, only to feel that someone had touched his most precious blue and white porcelain with fingerprints and handprints. In the past, Lu Xiangjun would rather break his precious porcelain than allow others to touch his own things. But now, he only felt sorry for Yanyi, whether he was forced, threatened, or hated him to the core. Lu Xiangjun saw Yanyi mount the motorcycle and saw him allow Xiao Wenying to put his hand on his waist and let him hold him. Yanyi was preparing to start the motorcycle, but Lu Jinyi put one hand on the motorcycle's head. The heart of the disaster lasted for a long time. I saw him go crazy and ask the disaster. Long Yan, where are you going? Yanyi ignored him and turned the accelerator. The next second, the motorcycle roared and left. Yan, don't you recognize me? Lu Shijin ran desperately to chase the motorcycle that was getting farther away until the green light was lit and his footsteps were blocked by traffic. His vision turned black, and his feet went soft. He took 2 steps forward and slowly squatted down while holding onto the traffic light. Yanyi's confused and sympathetic gaze had been lingering in his mind. The eyes were distant and calm, as if they were strangers from 2 worlds that had never met, and suddenly there was a small hand holding a milk candy in the palm of it. Lu Jinyi was stunned. He looked up and saw a boy squatting in front of him. Xiao Wenqi was squatting in front of him. He was curiously tilting his head and sizing him up. Then he stretched out his hand holding the milk candy and blinked his eyes timidly. This is for you. Lu Shijin carefully took it like a treasure and held the cream candy in his palm. He looked at Wenqi and skipped across the road. 4 alpha bodyguards kept their distance and followed behind. Lu Shijin found a clean tissue and carefully wrapped the milk candy in his palm one by one, concentrating as if he were carving expensive gemstones. Through the tissue, the smell of milk sugar came out. At this moment, Lu Jingxi couldn't help tears falling from his eyes. He tore open the tissue. He wolfed down the small milk candy into his mouth and chewed hard. He chewed very slowly. I'm afraid he ate it carelessly and felt that he chewed hard like a wolf tearing his cheeks and bones. What's wrong with this? Lu Xiangjun's brain was filled with pain. Why didn't the rabbit come and hug him? Why would he go off with someone else? Did Bunny abandon him?